Hyperscale.
Hello and welcome to the Transform Legal video podcast series from us at Nexion. The series explores the digital transformation need of law firms throughout the UK. Within the series, I, Matthew Newton, speak to leading voices within the legal tech sector around their experiences of helping law firms digitally transform, the pressures that they're facing, and some key takeaways that can help their journey. Today, we have the fantastic Derek Southall of Hyperscale, one of the best known names and faces of the UK legal tech sector. Myself and Derek explore many different subjects within the legal tech spectrum, with a particular focus on the legal tech landscape, what's happening in the market, and what he would like to see occur from the legal tech providers to simplify that digital transformation for law firms of every size. Okay, let's take a look. Hi Derek, so thanks for joining here at an unusual location, so Tilt in Birmingham.
Great to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm not the pinball wizard, but I'm going to try and negotiate the maze of legal tech in this discussion. So just to start off with, obviously we're having conversations with various voices within legal tech, linked together around the subject of digital transformation and how law firm leaders can navigate the complexity of creating a digital strategy for their firm. You speak to law firm leaders of all sizes in terms of the size of their firm. What's it like for the guys out there, the ladies and gentlemen that are trying to create a tech strategy for their law firm? How are they progressing? Is there real momentum within the firms, or are they maybe hitting some blockers and challenges that they're struggling to overcome?
So a really great question, and I mean I think that the headlines really are that we've seen more and are seeing more change now in this 5-year period than the 25 that have gone before. And I think law firm leaders and partners and lawyers, I've never seen this volume and velocity of stuff to navigate. So it's ironic we're in a pinball cafe, because I think for many of them it's a bit like a pinball machine where my life, what do? We're staring at this enormous period of change and lots of things hitting us on multiple fronts, together with the business cases and the resourcing of it all. So I think it's really hard. I think some things that people are realising. The fundamental, so most law firms, large lawyers run things on a best of breed model for years. Smaller and SME firms have typically run things with combined systems. I think what people are realising is that model is 35, 40 years old. And is it really fit for purpose anymore? We've got clients who are really trying to focus on a fantastic customer experience. The reality is that emails and a bit of portals. We can do better. So what we're starting to, so I think it's got several dimensions to this. I think law firms are really having to consider things like investment cases, personnel, skills. We've talked before about this digital onion. A lot of the technology, you've got stuff that affects the whole business, but I've got stuff in different practice areas that they haven't got the resource to do, and they need subject matter experts in those areas. So there's a whole piece around that. But I think what they're also trying to do is to really think through their platform for the future. What does a great platform look like? Is it, and I quite like this model of almost like a cloud-based, browser-based tool that you can, if you've got to share things with clients, you can push it out. If you've got to work with other parties, you can push out an ability to use the platform for that if you've got to subcontract. So I think people are really, really thinking about this. One bit, the whole AI thing has turned things on its head as well, because what most law firm partners have been told for years, oh God, you've got to digitise, you've got to do all of this. And they sort of took it seriously, but didn't. When you started seeing what AI could do in Gen AI, you literally were seeing sort of chins bounce off the table. And I think what people realised is we're going to have to get our act together in this area. But actually, it's sort of it's accelerated digital as well. So again, dare I say it, we're seeing more engagement from at exec level, building out skills at exec level, trying to build out skills in different practice areas, and actually almost this two-way accountability from the partners, where the partners want to know, managing partner, CEO, what's the plan? And the CEO and managing partners want to know, okay, what's your plan? What are you going to do to make your area great in this thing? So there's a heady mix of things. I think what is helpful, we're starting to see a newer breed of systems, more fungible systems come through, and I think that's not necessarily the answer by itself, but that's part of the answer, because I go back to, I think what's gone before for the last 35 years is probably too rigid to deal with some of the stuff we're going to see in the next few years without adapting.
I mean, the picture you're painting is the same as what I'm seeing, which is a lot of complexity for law firm leaders. And I think the picture you're painting in terms of the direction of travel, a platform, an ecosystem that you can try and bring best of breed in, you can be agile and respond to what the market is providing you in terms of new tooling. But from the law firm leaders I speak to, it's the level of complexity in terms of creating a tech or digital strategy for their firm is ever increasing, and now AI is the cherry on top. So
just on that as well, I mean, one thing we've got to remember, for years this expression legal tech's been used. Most technology used historically in law firms has been technology. There's been no legal in it. It could have been, like a PMS, a document management system, etc. The proportion of proper legal tech involving proper automation, and that could cover sort of AI case, whatever, has been relatively low. And I think we are going to see that transition, but with that transition brings with it another, if you're a firm and you've got 50 teams in your firm focusing on different things, how on earth do you resource that change management, etc., in those areas? So again, I think we just need some fundamentally different models for how we operate. And it may be a full service firm becomes incredibly more difficult to do unless you've got embedded technologists or subject matter experts in those areas who also understand the technology.
So much to talk about. So
we're going to be here hours.
because there's so much that springs to mind there. So we're talking about technology, and the focus of this conversation with yourself is to kind of get an understanding as to the landscape of the market and where you see firms investing and the emerging technology, how that's being utilised. But to bring it to the digital transformation pyramid that we use to try and open law firm leaders' eyes as to the importance of people and process when creating a tech and digital strategy. Do you see law firm leaders understanding that more fully, that actually you need to get the people and processes in place to then unlock technology? And the reason what triggered in my mind when you were talking then was I had a great conversation with Tom Connor of Neckan, a consultancy operator in the UK, in the US, who talked about the need for law firms to set up dedicated digital services teams so that they can respond to the needs of multiple departments in terms of creating the technology that powers the business. But the output of that is to create a revenue generating section of the firm that is generating revenue rather than just being as a seen of a cost. And the result of that is actually really innovative, legal-centered services, legal-centered initiatives that's revolutionising how law firms deliver services. But that's the end point, and I think that you're kind of pointing towards that, actually use technology in an innovative way. But the starting point, as we discussed with Tom initially, was the right people and processes in place to be able to create this digital services team. So I suppose two-part question. Are law firm leaders seeing the importance of people and process around technology, or is it still buying technology and then seeing how it fits into the firm?
No, I think they're definitely seeing it, and I think the challenge, I think, goes back to this velocity and volume point. they're having to, so many of them are, adopting better models for program management. Many of them are trying to get their heads around how they educate their people. I mean, I just sort of sit there going, I've never seen the need to educate people as fully as at the moment, because we're just going through this massive sort of transition. So they're absolutely getting that. I think where they're really struggling, I think they're struggling still on what does great look like as an operating vision to make this happen. I think they're still struggling with what I call that digital onion problem, which is, if you've got 50 teams, how on earth do you do something that helps all of these in the right way, etc., getting under the skin? But they are very, very aligned with the challenge. I think one interesting bit, which we're starting to see, boils down to almost like, what does the ideal lawyer look like in the future, and what does the ideal partner look like? So if I'm a jobbing lawyer, what do I need to know about now? I need to know, I don't necessarily need to be a technology expert, but I need to know when there's something that can be done better so I can engage with whoever in the firm. I've need to know about how to price differently. If your delivery isn't just linked to headcount and billable hours, I need to know about, is the risk profile different? And I think you need to be smart. If you're dealing with corporate clients, the weapon of choice for corporate clients is Microsoft 365. So if somebody goes, I don't know, let's get some Power BI reporting with a Power Automate, thing and bolt on a bit of Sway or something, you need to know about that as well. And we had this, we were involved in a tender, and a law firm partner, bless him, there was a big component of technology, and we were part of the assessment panel, and he got really interrogated by the client about the solution. And to his credit, poor guy, he was coming in over Zoom or Teams from holiday or whatever, but he handled it really, really well. And I remember sitting there, now sadly he didn't get appointed for other reasons, but I remember sitting there thinking, that's a law firm partner of the future. And what we are seeing clients do is really look at, competencies. What digital, operational or risk-based competencies do you need? Because those competencies probably look very different for a lawyer going forward to how they've looked back in the past, even down to how you sell, how you price work. It's all, all of that's changing. So people are looking really carefully at that sort of thing, combined with, well, what sort of people do we hire? How do we educate people? How do we get them to that? And some of those things you can't educate until you've decided your own position. As well, which is hard as a firm.
So actually, I was painting a picture there from previous conversations about the need to centralise digital services and create to enable innovation and to create a revenue-making, tech department. But what you're also pointing is we also need to decentralise these tech skills, because the average partner, the average fee earner needs broader skills when it comes to not just tech, but business analysis and risk analysis and so on and so forth. So can both things be true at the same point? But
I think, your perfect firm, you're going to have a brilliant platform and brilliant what I call machining capabilities to deliver stuff. You're going to have your act sorted about how you deliver work differently at differing price points, and et cetera, and you're probably going to have some sort of, alternative legal services, digital services arm. That's the ideal world, but how can you redesign a firm within 3 years? There's a really interesting point about, or a couple of points related, but I was involved with something where there was a brilliant salesman. This guy was brilliant, it's superb, and he was selling outsourced services to help transform a firm and, almost like, business transformation within business services. And he used this line, he turned around and said, look, if you're a law firm, and you've got 20 brilliant business cases. So if we do this and invest this, rather than £100 per transaction, it's going to go to 12. And you've got 20 of those, and your reason for not doing any of them is simply resource. You're failing the business, because these are all valid business cases. So what you need to do is to build those business cases, and you're sat there going, actually, there's a lot of sense in that. We see so many clients who, oh God, we can't take on too many things, 3 or 4 things. And you're going, it's almost like, which of your children don't you feed then? Because it's like, well, what about the rest of the business? So I think we've just got to have some fresh thinking, some new models. We're seeing more and more firms. Historically, the very large firms have partnered like clients with the alternative legal service providers. We're seeing that much more now with SME firms. where it's a bit like, that's what we can do here, that sort of stuff. We've got to just rethink delivery broadly.
So you pointed towards it earlier, but is there a place, will full service firms, mid-tier full service firms, be able to compete in 5 or 10 years' time across every service area when we've got niche firms that are able to invest, are able to innovate, are able to deliver services digitally more effectively? Is it just unrealistic for full service firms to be able to compete long term?
Do you know what? I think there's a piece around partnership dynamics and personalities here. And I think back to what I've seen over the years. If I was a partner in a practice area, well, I look at people who've done this. If I'm a partner in a practice area now, and I take a view, I am responsible for this business and this part of the business being successful, I would be all over this and forming my view about what needed to be done, and I would be relentless about getting that business case backed, and I would make it happen. And actually, I look at all the great partners in the past, they've never been told by management what to do. They've always gone off and done something themselves, or they're the people who've instigated it. And I think that's what we need. We're almost going to have a new generation of leaders. And I've said this to some firms, it's a bit like, if you've got like 6 practice areas here, you're a managing partner, you've got 6 practice areas, and those practice leaders haven't got a plan in any of these areas, or aren't driving any of these areas, or basically, making themselves a pain by demanding stuff from you, they're probably the wrong people. They either need to understand this and come up with a plan and drive it, or they probably need to bring somebody on board who can, or they need to get out of the way.
I think part of the problem is a lot of mid-tier firms don't have the program management above those department leaders to be able to take hold of those use cases and create the conditions for success around them. I think, I don't know. Is that the quite often there's not the operational model to support them?
So dare I say it, I think, this goes to the role of a managing partner or chief exec. So there is a bit of sort of, setting out a mission. But fundamentally, I think your job is to put in place the components for success as a firm. So if I've got 6 practice areas and all those 6 practice areas are demanding stuff that makes sense, going back to my salesman point, it all makes eminent sense. I've got to make sure that the rest of the machine is capable of delivering that. So that becomes my job. To an extent, you're harvesting the wind and just making sure that you're ready for that demand. And we are seeing firms changing in that regard, and they are recognising they're having to change. And this is not belittling lawyers or anything, but for some of them it's a real change up, move out of the comfort zone, and that goes back to this volume and velocity point. It has happened so quickly.
But what we're pointing towards is to make this digital transformation, to improve the tech strategy and to innovate and move forward. It comes back to people investment, in the fact that to make those 6 service areas, to really move them forward, you've got to create the operating model that enables that success, enable that forward movement. But normally that means people. Whereas the challenge I see is I still come across firms, good-sized firms, without program management, without project management, without business analysts or sufficient business analysts. You've got, I had a great conversation with Sarah Blair of Thornton's last week. They're moving forward massively because they've got some additional funding where they brought on service designers. So it's really connecting the firm all together and moving. But so it's a rarity, really. And that's the challenge. I think a lot of law firms have got to, they feel more comfortable sometimes investing in technology than the people that will enable the firm to get the most out of the tech. So you talked about platform. So that's the other area. So we've got 6 service areas in this example, all with great ideas, all wanted to move forward, but they've got to have the platform to be able to enable that. Now, what's your take on the landscape? Are there platforms out there? Are there platforms coming online? Various tooling, best of breed, open APIs, closed APIs, whatever it is. What does that landscape look like at the moment?
What I'm not advocating is ripping everything up and throwing it all away. But you've got this situation now. Let's take large law. PMS, documented email management, a bit of CRM, you're sort of saying, well, that to me by itself is not fit for purpose. And I'm envisaging this model, and I think actually in a way SME firms have operated more on a combined platform in a better place. But if you've got something cloud-based, some fungible orchestration layer, so if all of a sudden you get some instruction in to go and buy 30 shops and got a report, you can build something quickly in no code. If you've got to share information, you can push out instances of the platform. All the onboarding stuff that is necessary but everyone hates, you could give people a joined up experience. So all that sort of stuff, and I think we've got to do better, and I think there are emerging cloud-based systems that will do that. The one bit as well that I don't know if this makes me laugh or depresses me, but there's a site in the US, I think it's existed about 10 years ago, called Lady Marry, and it's if you're organising a wedding. And it takes you through an order of events. So the first thing is dates, venue and church, tick, tick, tick. And then it takes you through all of the other things. And it's like a joint process with a provider. And you sort of sit there and going, well, in 40 years of legal tech, how many joint client experience platforms have you got? You struggle to name one. So in probate, there's something called Exigent, which is a sort of fintech entrepreneurs, digital grant of probate, pre-authentication, dashboards, auto settlement. That's their vision. And you commend them because it's like taking, that's not a deal by email sort of thing. You've got in volume claims, there's a plaintiff system called FinLegal that actually deals with the customer interactions for collecting all sorts of information. But you just go, it's almost madness to conceive the fact that we've got none of that. And the fact that still the primary tool of lawyers is Outlook and Word. That's not going to lend itself to the best possible customer experience, is it?
No. And so looking at the landscape, obviously the sector's been dominated by aggregators over recent years. Has that helped the cause or has it hindered the cause?
So we do obviously that chart where we try to map what's going on, and there's positives and negatives, but I think if you were to focus on what does it typically mean, I think you imagine that when a product is bought by an aggregator, you'd imagine that there'd be something in it for the client. You'd sit there going, right, well, okay, I'm going to get more professionalisation, more strength and depth of resource, better integrations, etc., etc. Sometimes that happens, but often it doesn't. Often what happens is the best people go. Often what happens is the aggregators will be backed by private equity. There'll be pressure to increase costs, etc., etc. So I think, and that's not always the case. We've seen some good examples as well. So I can think of one product where there's been massive investment, etc., etc. But I think it's suboptimal, really. I think there could be a lot more done that could be the benefit of, if you like, of moving to a product backed by an aggregator with a real sort of strength and depth. When I speak to clients in the market, I was on a call the other day, about 7 people, and one client was particularly troubled by an experience they'd just had. And basically, we ended up having a call. We put it the other way. Which companies do we get great service from? And names were named. And suddenly realised, hang on a minute, with the exception of one, they were owner managed businesses. Yeah. And you were sitting there going, it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to do sort of jaw-dropping service. And I think there is potential to do that. Yeah. So I think there is some work to be done on that generally. That being said also, I think the way that technology is moving and the need to invest, you recognise it's going to be very hard for some independent players to keep up, even on InfoSec, So you've got this, we've almost got to find the optimum model.
Isn't the ideal scenario, the aggregators should bring positive outputs in terms of the amount of investment that they can put forward, and obviously the integrations by bringing something into an ecosystem, there's stronger integrations. but maybe the perfect scenario is just more open APIs, so that those 6 service areas as we just talked about, if Bob, who's leading one of those service areas, if he finds a fantastic product that's right for him, there's the easy path to integration.
Absolutely. And I mean, just going back, I think what is strange about legal, you look at many other industries, and there is a platform for there's HR platforms, there are finance platforms, but legal, that market is still evolving. And what we do want, a perfect situation is you almost end up with a few players in the market who can deliver that with this open API model, where the things that those products aren't as strong at, or etc., you can bolt on in a meaningful way. So that bit absolutely needs some help. I mean, one other thing, and this sort of goes to platform, we've talked about data, but one thing we've started to see in the last 18 months, which we've never seen before, let's accept the world is moving more and more to SaaS vendors. Okay, it's almost impossible not to get one, and there's lots of benefits for everybody with that, including security, etc., etc. Now, what we've started to see, which we hadn't seen before, is people beginning to say, hang on a minute, we, as well as being with a SaaS vendor, we want to back up our own data. And the drivers behind this are 2 or 3-fold. As a basic risk driver, CrowdStrike, etc., we want that. As a point about we want to drive our own data strategy, we want to use Fabric, we need our data, or this system's holding a lot of our what I call client-facing data. So there's a piece around that. There's a piece around AI and Gen AI. There's a piece about basically negotiating position where a challenge. One problem that is coming more and more with SaaS at the moment is a lack of long-term price certainty. So we need vendors to make money, absolutely got to make money, but we're seeing situations where people are being presented with very large price increases out of the blue, and if they sit there and going, what will my budget look like in 2 years, they won't have a clue, and that is being looked at. But again, another point by going this backup type route is if you then find another product, you can basically you've got your data already. You're not beholden. You're not held. But even on your point about open APIs, there's systems out there that will not want you to have your own data, and there's systems out there, and this is another big emerging problem, that will only want you to use their AI, and you may or may not be happy with that from an infosec or a quality of delivery perspective, from a price perspective, and every client I know looking at AI at the moment wants no long-term commitments, because this market we've seen from all the Chinese events in the last week, this market could be turned on its head by any announcement we hear today.
Yeah, and firms of a certain size will want to create their own intellectual property, and the core of that, the core of having that ability, comes with controlling and accessing their own data. So you touched upon Fabric. Microsoft Fabric obviously announced the last couple of years, and we're seeing. I'm very interestingly following mid-tier law firms that are going on that Fabric journey. There's also alternatives like Snowflake. Obviously, it's Databricks, which is a little bit more expensive. But these were the realms. These products were kind of the tools for the real top 50 law firms, and we're now seeing it come down into mid-tier, because mid-tier law firms recognise by controlling and managing their data, they open the door to AI, but also loads of other capabilities as well. Obviously business intelligence, generative business intelligence, and so on. So from an AI point of view, what's your feeling in terms of where are we? Is anybody within the sector really getting any kind of response, any output, any progress from utilising AI tools, or is everything just at POC stage really?
Right. So context for this is we act for some of the biggest firms in the world down to some of the smallest and everything in between. So this is a sort of breadth of market point. I think firms are doing one of about 4 things. Copilot is growing in adoption, but people are struggling with the change management, etc., but they're finding ways to start getting some benefit, but they accept there could be a long journey, and also doing some stuff with Azure AI. We're seeing a focus on the publishers. two big publishers and what they are doing, and you can't get away from the fact that those businesses have got huge technological firepower and 150 years corpus of curated knowledge. So you start seeing that. You're seeing the vendors, the big vendors who have got some, so this could include both the main DM providers, have got some quite advanced sort of AI offering, and because you're already using those vendors and it's embedded, etc., you're going to see that. And there's some smaller embedded AI where we're seeing a real uptick in things like interesting playbook tools, where people are accepting in the world of Gen AI that's getting faster, you're going to need things to help you review incoming documents much better. So this could be, you know, the Kim technologies, the Doc Jurises, the Ciceros, the Black Boilers, things like that. Litera doing some good stuff on as well. And then the final thing you're seeing is proof of concept with specific products like the Harveys, the Layers, the Spellbooks, etc. Now of that, I think basically at the moment from what we're seeing, most firms are doing stuff internally. Very few people are using that in a client-facing way. And many of the announcements we've seen, we know are proof of concepts. And so people are still finding that way, and they don't know what's going to be announced tomorrow. You know, you can, you know, as we say to clients, you know, we're assuming you haven't got infinite time and money. You know, you can only spend that money once. So I think, you know, people are experimenting, but what they're recognising, you know, as a business, they're going to need some AI knowledge and literacy. Their people are. So this is part of a journey. You know, one client said to us, this is a big firm, we are putting in Copilot on an enterprise-wide basis, but we accept it's probably going to be 5 years before we see any ROI and people even get used to using it.
Yeah, and it's the same. I mean, there's a common theme. It's people, it's process running through all of the conversations that I have with leading voices in the sector. It's about creating those conditions for success, and you can start putting things in place now that you will benefit from later down the line. For example, you know, broadening the skills set of your fee earners and of your partners, of creating an environment where use cases are identified and explored. All of that great work, no matter what tooling you utilise in the future, will all be utilised. And especially for those that want to create their own intellectual property rather than rely on third parties. We have our own Nexian AI platform that we've got a number of law firms starting to play with, and also accountancy firms. The great thing of that is low cost price, and it allows them to build their own intellectual property, which is another way of tackling it compared to buying a third party product that has built in some intellectual property, but you're going to pay for the privilege of that. So it's coming back to creating the conditions for success, structurally, skill-wise, and so on, that will benefit you no matter what technology we're talking about, whether it be AI, whether it be evolving a platform, integrating products, and so on.
You've got to cut your cloth accordingly as well and work at what's right for your business. So I was on some big global law firm sort of discussion, and there's somebody I think from Brazil and said, we're a small firm in Brazil, what would you do if you were us? Because we want to get into AI. And it's like you're sitting there thinking the best thing that they could do is go and spend 30 quid a month on Copilot and watch a load of YouTube videos, was the reality, because that would give them the biggest bang for the buck. And it's going to vary by area and vary by seniority. You know, the bit I always go back to in the early days of Gen AI, I remember someone saying to me, you know, a great engineer pal of mine, he just turned around and said, you know, you've just got to view this as a very, you know, very enthusiastic, no-cost assistant, etc., that you've got to supervise really carefully. And that is still correct. But, you know, if you use these tools well and you force yourself to use them, I mean, I had a day recently where I forced myself to have an enhanced digital day. And I reckon my productivity was up 20% by the end of it, but my head was aching beyond belief. I don't get headaches because I'd physically had to rewire, you know, 25 plus years of ways of working. So you've got to, but there are things that it will do that you cannot get away from are just brilliant.
But it's easier to invest in those lawyers of the future to kind of accelerate the change within the law firms than maybe you rely on us more experienced older people to learn new skills. Invest in the younger people coming up.
There's a corporate we work for, and this was just hysterical, where they discovered that half of their cohort of graduates were using Gen AI for the applications, and you basically had a good chunk of the business were going, this is terrible, they're bounders and CADs, throw them out of the process, and the other half were going, no, this is exactly what we want. And there was this fierce argument internally, and what they did, which I think was sensible. They have two stages, and the one is clearly, this has got to be you. It's got to be you, Matt Newton. You've got to answer this. But the second stage is all bets are off. Do what you want. Fill your boots. But you go back to, it's like, what skills are you going to want for somebody coming in? And the Microsoft survey, the Future of Work survey, was fascinating, because some of the younger people, they were saying basically, if you don't have some AI for me to use, I'm going to bring my own in anyway. And that may or may not be secure. But the second thing is, we are now more capable, so we expect to be paid more quicker because our careers are going to advance. Yeah. And again, this is, it's going to be some heady HR issues to navigate in this new world.
Yeah, all bets are off. So as a takeaway then, I've got my own takeaways from this conversation, but for the law firm leader, mid-tier law firm, trying to make the right decisions in terms of moving their firm forward from a technical and digital strategy point of view, what would be your key piece of advice for them at this point?
I think basically you've got to have a plan and a strategy, and that you've got to accept what you may want, what you may be used to is a strategy that says, right, we're going to do this and that's where we're going to go. I think this is much more of a direction of travel strategy. You've got to produce something, but actually keep this thing under rolling review with the markets. I think the process is different as well, because seldom is there something in a law firm that is something that goes, it's deep at central level, but deep at practice area level. So I think you've got to have a much more collaborative model to come up with these strategies, and you've got to really think carefully about the responsibilities, and the structure to deliver it. I mean, for example, if I wind the clock back 10 years ago, let's imagine I was head of real estate. What's my job? I've got to keep the people happy. A law firm used to make money by having, the right number of people with the right skills at the right time. It was very headcount driven. It's now not. I've seen things done that actually have very high margin with a much lower headcount. So what's my job now? My job now, if I'm in that role, is to basically make sure that I understand the needs of my clients and new methods of delivering. I need to understand the digital landscape to make sure that I am one of the most competitive firms who can deliver the best experience. It's a different mindset, but people have got to know, where do these responsibilities sit? This is, you could put some technology in place like a DMS and you could do it for lawyers. This is stuff you've absolutely got to do with them, because it goes under the skin of how you deliver, accuracy, blah, 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 and all this. And there's other bits with it where you've got to rethink some roles. So we're seeing a lot of people now rethinking the role of the PSL. Yeah. Knowledge custodians in a firm. Yeah. What does that mean in an AI age? Debate, So I think you've got to build the capabilities, you've got to build the delivery model, you've got to orchestrate that there are viable plans and keep those under review. And I think within that, you've really got to think about skills and massively think about education. People are going to struggle with this. You've got to bring them on. I don't think education and change have ever been as important in a law firm.
I think my couple of takeaways from this conversation is get the right platform, get a platform that doesn't take you into a cul-de-sac that you can't develop, integrate into, and so on, and push your department heads to have a plan themselves, but then create the conditions for success for those departments head to be able to develop their offering, develop their team, the technical strategy, and so on. So there's a technical element there and there's a people element there. So wonderful. Thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Let's go and have a game of pinball.